Well, our top story this hour, South Africa needs efficient ports and proper railway lines to grow the local economy, so says the president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, emphasizing that growth in the economy while delivering the State of the Nation address at the City Hall in Cape Town on Thursday is empirical. He said over several years, the functioning of the ports have declined relative to ports in other parts of the world and on the African continent, saying that constrained economic activity is partly to blame.
The agricultural sector, for example, relies heavily on efficient, well-run ports to export their produce to overseas markets. The Minister of Agriculture was telling me that we've now opened the Chinese market for citrus, for a number of other products that we produce or we grow here. And we therefore need efficient ports to be able to export all that produce to high demanding markets like China and many other places. Fresh produce cannot wait for days and even weeks while stuck in a terminal. This hurts businesses and compromises our country's reputation as an exporter of fresh produce.
He says Transnet is addressing these challenges and is focused on improving operational efficiencies at the ports through procuring additional equipment and implementing new systems to reduce congestion.
Transnet will soon ask for proposals from private partners for the Durban and the Ngqura container terminals within the next few months, which will enable partnerships to be in place at both terminals by October of 2022. Transnet will start the process of providing third-party access to its freight rail network from April 2022 by making slots available on the container corridor between Durban and City Deep in Gauteng.
Ramaphosa also says that Transnet has developed partnerships with the private sector to address cable theft and vandalism on the freight rail network through advanced technologies and additional security personnel.
This collaborative effort is already showing results in reduced disruptions to the rail operations. The poor state of passenger rail in our country has a direct and detrimental impact on the lives of our people. We are therefore working hard to rehabilitate the passenger rail network in 10 priority corridors. The Southern Line in Cape Town and the Mabopane Line in Pretoria has been reopened.
He highlighted that the Southern Line in Cape Town and the Mabopane Line in Pretoria have been reopened and will be followed by the remaining lines in the next year.
Right, to talk about what some of the challenges are, Sonja Carstens is the media liaison officer for the United National Transport Union, or UNTU. She joins us now to talk about some of this. A very good evening to you, Sonja, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So it's been said the president went from bullet trains in 2019, promising the advent of this fixing vandalism. We know that he gushed that at least we still have 1 million passengers who use rail to and fro. But as he mentioned, the Central Line, the Mabopane lines have been the bugbear. So going back to basics seems to be the prudent thing to do. Do you agree?
Yes, we do. Good evening. Yes, we do. But the president failed to point out that although he's made several promises, and indeed you've highlighted quite a few, like for instance the bullet train, very little has been done to date. There's no tangible difference today as opposed to a year ago. The only difference is that certain lines are up and running, only limited to a few stations, but the majority of railway lines are still down.
All right. So he said at some point that we are investing 1.4 billion rand in each of the lines to provide a safe, reliable and affordable service. We know this has been the mission statement in the various turnaround strategies of PRASA. Little has come to that. And of course, there are other complications which we can get into. But there are those who are asking this question, with all of this problems that rail, and particularly the network in South Africa, faces, why shouldn't passenger rail not be declared a national disaster to kickstart some sort of comprehensive approach to fixing it? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, passenger rail is a national disaster. We don't have the ability to fix PRASA on our own. We need all stakeholders to come on board, and it won't only be up to PRASA to do the job. We are calling and have been repeatedly calling for government to merge PRASA back with Transnet. Transnet being the bigger of the two, having the resources to build PRASA back to its former glory. That's not happening. We've been asking for numerous years for the South African Defence Force to be deployed to patrol the 33,000 kilometers of railway line we've got in the country, because right now, as we speak, our cable theft are continuing, whether or not it's Transnet Freight Rail, whether or not it's PRASA, whether or not it's Eskom, it's all over. There's almost 600 incidents per month. That's only in the Transnet Freight Rail environment. So having said that, obviously the South African Police Service aren't up to the job. It's an enormous task. And it won't be simple. Even if Transnet continues like they're currently doing in arresting about 500 suspects per month, we don't see them reaching our courts. So we don't have the capacity to investigate these cases nor to prosecute them properly. And that's the gist of the problem. Irrespective of what we want PRASA or Transnet in itself to do, it won't help. We need a holistic approach, and hence we should declare it as a national disaster.
I mean, some of the problems that the rail network have experienced is being pointed out as part of the general socio-economic milieu in South Africa. What we've seen, people building their homes on the tracks of the rail networks there, is because they say they have nowhere else to go. So it becomes a multi-departmental problem that needs leadership. It's been said, particularly at PRASA, starting with the board, saying that South Africa cannot continue to have poor leadership, withstand another 5 years of the current leadership. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, given the fact that there hasn't been a permanent board since what? Since 2017. I just want to make sure that I'm getting my dates right here. We've seen the CEO of PRASA also seems to be elusive in getting somebody who is permanently there where there aren't problems. Would that solve the problem, given, as I said, multiple challenges to fixing the road network as a whole?
Well, that certainly is the start of fixing a problem, and you're quite right. PRASA has been an unstable environment since 2015, when the former CEO, Lucky Montana, was dismissed. Ever since, we had acting CEO upon acting CEO upon acting CEO. Everyone staying less than a year, the same with the board. So in an environment like that, you would see changes happening, what we've seen with numerous of the previous acting chief executive officers. But it will only last a few months. Then the person's head is cut off again, and there's a new CEO or a new board. It's not conducive to building the railway network to its former glory. Secondly, PRASA does not have the money to keep on paying rent to Transnet for utilizing the railway infrastructure, or for instance, for running with locomotives. So you would recall that when the cables were stolen during the hard lockdown and the stations were destroyed, Prasa leased locomotives from Transnet to be able to run a service. And all of those locomotives were taken back by Transnet, the last, quite recently on the route in Vereniging. And Prasa is still not able to pay Transnet 2.3 billion for the leasing of those locomotives. So once again, we've got one passenger rail reporting to the Minister of Transport, and another that is the rail responsible for freight and goods. We've got reporting to the Minister of Public Enterprises. Why? They're using the same railway network. They should be joined together, and that's also part of the problem. We as UNTU have been calling for this, for the two to be merged under one minister at least, for the past 5 years. And President Cyril Ramaphosa personally has been addressed by, we have addressed him in his personal capacity while he was still the vice president. And to date, he's taken no action.
Would there be a need for legislative changes? For instance, some of, depending from which prism you look at this, proactive action taken by the Transport Minister in appointing an administrator, for instance, has been frowned upon, saying that he doesn't have an authority to do that. So are you saying that you also need to look at the legal framework that governs the Transport Department?
Well, indeed, because currently we've got a situation where the railway safety regulator, who is the so-called watchdog of rail safety in South Africa, are reporting to the very same minister as Prasa. In other words, it's a brother-sister situation. How can we expect the railway safety regulator to act against Prasa when at the end of the day, if they want to take action against Prasa, they have to cite the very same minister they are also accountable to? And that's the problem. We need a difference. We need an independent railway safety regulator, not responsible to the very same minister. Hence we're saying move Prasa to the Minister of Public Enterprises and keep the watchdog authority with the Minister of Transport.
Right.
But that is something that's not happening at all.
If you're seeking to reform the industry, some say you have to allow the private sector to play a greater role. Do you support that? And some of the criticism is what has said to be hyper-centralization. For instance, the Western Cape provincial government, the Gauteng provincial government have offered Prasa to lend a hand in some of the challenges that it faces. Could they play a more meaningful role in fixing and operating passenger rail, in your view?
Well, we are opposing the private sector because we are saying that get back to basics and fix the core. If you allow, for instance, private participation on a railway network, you want to give the private sector slots on a railway network, which currently Transnet is struggling to optimize because of cable theft. What will be the problem if the private company uses the very same railway network? They will be faced with the very same problem. The gist of the problem is unprecedented vandalism and theft of our state infrastructure, which is the railway network. And we don't get government to declare it as a national key point, as we, for instance, have with some of the Transnet pipeline divisions. The bottom line is the railway network are key to the South African economy. Without that, we won't be able to address the unemployment rates, to address the social economic crisis we faced within our country. So that's the start. That's where we need to start and fix the basics. And currently we sit in the Transnet and Prasa environment with a dedicated police unit called the Rapid Rail Police Unit. It's got 3,300 police officials. But that's only on the books. If you go to the train stations, if you go to train depots, you won't find them. If you go to these units themselves, you will find that they don't have the resources. They don't have vehicles. They don't have firearms. So they've got nothing. to empower them to, for instance, patrol our railway lines. In the past, they used to have horses, for instance, and they would use horses to patrol the railway lines. But now they don't have vehicles, they don't have bikes, they don't have horses, they don't even have firearms. So what's the sense in having this unit? Hence, we are saying restore the former railway police. That was simply merged with the South African Police Service in 1986. To help the government of the day to fight the unrest in the country. That was the only reason why the two police forces were merged, is to get more manpower to fight the unrest in the country. And now we don't have a need for that anymore. So we can have a dedicated railway police again.
And in fact, on the safety issue, it's been said that PRASA is in breach of court decisions. One, the Western Cape in 2019, saying that PRASA must come up with a commuter-centred safety plan. I think there are some constitutional court cases there as well on that. Thank you so much. Sonja Carstens is the Media Liaison Officer for the United National Transport Union, or UNTRU.